large at Prasa, and much work still needs to be done in addressing pervasive challenges relating to security, theft and vandalism of critical assets, and infrastructure, as well as sheer criminality that continues to undermine a provision of reliable commuter rail service. I'm pleased, Chairperson, to introduce Mr. Leonard Ramatlakane, the Chairperson of the newly appointed Board of Control of Prasa. He is no stranger to the transport portfolio and is well versed on the challenges confronting Prasa. I've no doubt that the caliber of the board we have appointed will rise to the occasion and tackle the challenges with the agency and single-minded commitment. We remain firmly on a path towards building a passenger rail agency that has the requisite capacity and leadership to deliver on its mandate. We are well on track with the infrastructure upgrades and modernization, amongst others, of the Central Line in Cape Town and Mabopane Corridor in Tshwane. In recent months, we unveiled a security strategy to tackle that sabotage of Prasa infrastructure. That security approach involves as well law enforcement agencies. Our rail system continues to be a target of theft and vandalism, senseless attacks on employees, and private security while on duty and sabotage. The security plan is premised on developing requisite internal capacity and capacity to mitigate and combat theft and vandalism of the rail infrastructure. Improving operational performance include the recovery of the commuter service and the acceleration of the modernization program. These are critical tasks that must be accelerated as they are central in positioning passenger rail as the backbone of our public transport system. In building on the work done by the previous accounting authorities, since the dissolution of the last board, we have concluded a shareholder compact with the new board. This compact emphasizes the agency of critical tasks that will deliver tangible outcomes in turning around the business. Among other priorities outlined in the shareholders compact, for the remainder of this financial year, we have prioritized the following: implementation of security and asset protection strategy plan, a measure of Prasa, CRES, and Intersite, a divisionalization of Autopacks, resolution of the Locomotives acquisition from Stadler Rail, ensuring the general overhaul of the rolling stock, and ensuring implementation of the presidential directive on the rollout of the rehabilitation of the Central Line in Cape Town and the Mabopane to Pretoria line in Gauteng. We remain disappointed, Chairperson, that the Prasa audit outcome for 2019-2020 is a disclaimer with findings. However, this outcome vindicates the correctness of our decision to dissolve the previous board and make decisive interventions. This outcome resonates with our findings of a broken organization. We are ever confident that the fruits of our intervention will reach maturity this financial year and will be evident in the 2020-2021 audit outcomes. In his audit opinion, the Auditor General flagged the following factors as the root causes for the disclaimer: inadequate governance records, instability in key positions, poor financial management and record keeping, lack of compliance, monitoring and enforcement, lack of consequence management, inadequate audit findings action plan, and inadequate oversight. I can assure you, honorable members, that significant progress has been made in areas we have prioritized subsequent to the dissolution of the previous board, whose results will only become evident in 2020-2021 financial year. This includes addressing all matters raised in the Auditor General's report and ensure that there are no repeat findings, accelerating interventions aimed at improving operational performance, expediting the implementation of the modernization program with the priority on fencing, signaling, pairway, and station upgrades, security interventions across all corridors, ensuring effective consequence management, and providing support to investigations currently underway by law enforcement authorities. In addition to the appointment of the board, significant progress has been made in filling critical vacancies at senior management level. During the course of this year, the following vacancies were filled by capable executive: Chief Executive Officer for Prasa Rail Division, Chief Executive Officer for Prasa Crest, Chief Executive Officer for Autopex, Chief Security Officer, and Group Company Secretary. The board has prioritized the filling of the vacancy of the Group Chief Executive Officer and is expediting this appointment with the urgency it deserves. We have no doubt, Chairperson and members of the committee, that the tide is turning and Prasa is well on track to deliver on the mandate of positioning rail as the backbone of our transport system. I thank you for the opportunity, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
All right. No, thank you very much, Minister, for that overview. A presentation has been sent to us, which I believe members have all received. May we go straight into it, and then we will take, and then questions will be fielded at that point. Right. So to the board, the presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, and good morning to all the honorable members, the Minister, Deputy Minister. The board of Prasa is in attendance. Chairperson, what we will do, I'll just do a few remarks, after which I'll ask the acting group CEO to make their presentation, and of course be able to take questions after that. Chair, as the Minister already indicated, we are in office for about a month, but it feels like a long time already. And I must say that there are a number of challenges that we as a board are committed to deal with. We are focusing immediately with the issue about stabilization, as the Minister speaks about stabilizing the organization in terms of a key position, policy aspect, including the issue about the problem that always be a problem of the SCM problems, policies, lack of policy on this, lack of that, but we are in the process of stabilizing that. And of course, the second thing is focusing Prasa on its core mandate. As a board, we are committed in making sure that it carries out that mandate. And of course, dealing with in that mandate, the issue about security issues that as the Minister indicated, the issue about CAPEX, which has been a problem for many years. We are focusing at that particular aspect as well, including to get the capabilities and skill to make sure that the infrastructure that the Minister speaks about is actually carried out. So without wasting a lot of time, I just want to ask that the Group C, acting Group CEO, then take the members of the committee with the presentation, and of course after that we will then deal with the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine. Let's proceed in that fashion. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and welcome to you, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to the Chairperson, to the Honourable Minister, to the Deputy Minister, to the Honourable Chair of the Board of Prasa, the board members, the Director General, the Honourable Committee members, the Group Exco members of Prasa, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. I am going to be very brief, Chair, because the Minister has covered most of the salient issues. So in some of the slides, I will move briefly. The Minister has already alluded to the fact that this current financial year, the financial year 1920 Prasa's audit outcome was a disclaimer. I would like the committee to take note that as much as the audit of the Auditor General was concluded at the end of September, the work of the current financial year 2020-2021 was not taken into consideration. In that, I would like to affirm and to confirm to the committee that the work of the current financial year was not taken into consideration. The issues that resulted to the disclaimer have already been alluded to, which talks to the issue of inadequate governance records, instability in key positions, which the Minister has already alluded that those positions have been filled and remaining with 2 positions, which is the Group CEO of Prasa and the Group CFO of Prasa. Poor financial management, record keeping, lack of compliance monitoring and consequence management, and inadequate audit findings action plan, and lack of effort to resolve the matters that are related to financial viability of Prasa and inadequate oversight. So these are the issues that have been raised that I will be taking the committee through in terms of the annual performance, and also to indicate what is it that we are doing as Prasa to address these issues. If we look at 2019-20 and we compare it with financial year 2018-19, the committee will notice that already there was a marginal decrease in the number of findings, audit findings, from 173 to 120, with as much as, and there is work that is currently underway to address these issues through an audit findings action plan that is structured per functional area and per division, and that gets reported at a Group Exco level. And that audit action plan will also be shared with the new current board, with the relevant committees of Prasa. Now, addressing the audit findings, Chair, I'm just going to indicate that the Board of Control has already established the board committees, the Audit and Risk, the Human Capital and Remuneration Committee, the Safety, Health and Environment, or the SHEC Committee, the Finance, Capital Investment and Procurement Committee, the Governance and Performance Committee. At the board induction last week, Saturday, the board has requested that they would request that there is an additional committee that would look specifically on the finances of Prasa. Chairperson, I will not repeat the following part in the slide that talks to the key positions that have been filled, because the Minister, the Honourable Minister, has already covered that point of the slide. Now the question is, what is it that Prasa is doing to address the audit findings, which repeat findings? I must allude to the committee chair that the issue of vandalism of the network of Prasa has exacerbated the issue that has been raised by the Auditor General, which indicated as one of the material findings that Prasa does not have a credible fixed asset register. Chair, there is an asset register at Prasa, but we take note that due to the COVID period, and also not only due to the COVID period, but also we did identify that a structured way was needed to ensure that a continuous updating of the asset register and ensuring that all the assets of Prasa are reflected on the asset register. To address that issue, Chair, we have developed key performance indicators that involve the establishment of the Chief Financial Officers Forum, so that all material irregularities are investigated, resolved, and condoned when necessary, with the relevant delegations that are available in the organization. Furthermore, Chair, one of the controls that we KPIs that we are working on is to ensure that we firm and we strengthen the internal control environment. We have identified that one of the key issues of the repeat findings is the lack of detection. And you would know, Chair, that detection does not only speak to finances, it includes various actions that must be performed in the organization. So that is the work that is performed by the CFO's forum in the organization that looks at reconciliation of finances that have been performed, including staffing and training of staff across Prasa on PFMA. As you know, colleagues, as employees join the organization, there is a requirement to ensure that they are trained on the PFMA, as well as refresher training is provided on the PFMA. We have also strengthened to ensure that there is a structured program that has been put in place for document management. The Honourable Minister has already alluded that one of the key findings was accessibility and availability of documents for audit findings. We have also, Chair, ensured that we do not depend on the Auditor General. So we are introducing self-assessments that are going to be implemented, Chair, before the end of this financial year, so that we close and we ensure that we track these issues on a continual basis. That talks, Chair, to the establishment of the internal control that is underway. Furthermore, Chair, to address the AG audit findings, we would know, Chair, that there is a proclamation that the SIU is dealing with the matters of Prasa that were raised on the Public Protector report, but because, excuse me, of capacity constraints internally, in September, a secondment agreement has been concluded with the SIU, and 4 members of the SIU have started to work on the 17 material irregularity matters that were raised by the AG. We have had already on the 10th of November, the first session with the SIU secondment team to track progress, and we are happy, Chair, that already 4 matters, there is progress out of those 17 matters. We are hoping, Chair, that by the end of February 2020, all those 17 material AG finding matters would have been investigated and the relevant consequence management would have been taken in the organization. Chair, in the next slide, I have already alluded to the fact that that CFO forum is to track and ensure that the audit findings are addressed. Also, Chair, the executive, the Chief Human Capital Officer of Prasa chairs a meeting which consists of all the CFOs, all the CEOs of Prasa and the executives, and they are held to account in terms of the progress that they are making to mitigate and to strengthen the control environment and to address the historical audit findings. As you would know, Chair, that in the previous sessions, the AG in the report also reports that there are AG findings that dates back to 2016 that has not been resolved. But Chair, I've already alluded that the 18-19 audit findings has been addressed. So that committee, Chair, sits on a monthly basis to ensure that they are able to report to the relevant board committees on a monthly basis. Prasa, I've already indicated the SIU secondment agreement that is underway. Chair, we have also noticed that there is a serious need for Prasa to revisit and revise its asset management approach. We are cognizant of the multidisciplinary program that has been put in place to mitigate the issue of vandalism at Prasa. We are also looking at resources in the short term to strengthen the security function. We are fast-tracking, Chair, to ensure that at least by the 1st of December, we are at least at 90% to insource the security to ensure that there are boots on the ground. Chair, we would like to also ensure that the asset register going forward is, on SEP, so that the verification of assets is managed, and for self-assessment audits, it is easy to access that asset register. Chair, currently there is also work that is done by the divisional CEOs and the CFOs to ensure that assets are tagged, they are verified, and the condition of the assets is done across the organization. At Prasa, we have gone on tender to appoint valuers to ensure that there is a clear understanding of what the levels of vandalism at the various stations across the country, to ensure that we can account of all the assets on the ground. But Chair, that is also going to require that the asset management approach, which currently there is a need to strengthen asset management at a group level. We have found that, Chair, in the divisions, in some of the divisions, there is best practice in how the assets are managed, but we would like to ensure that going forward, with the asset management approach that is in place, the asset register is updated on a continual basis, and it will become part of the group EXCO report to ensure that we keep track of what is happening in the organization. I have already alluded, Chair, on the audit findings, but this slide is just to give a detail of the 18-19 that there has been work, Chair, that has been conducted in this current financial year to ensure that we close the audit findings of the financial year 18-19, where there were 187 audit findings, and we have already addressed 75% of those findings. 19% are in progress, and 6% are the ones that must still be addressed by the team. I've already alluded, Chair, on the issue of ensuring that there is training and awareness of irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. We have already, Chair, engaged there's the colleague that is seconded to Prasa from National Treasury to ensure that by the end of December, we can ensure that employees, the training starts on the 1st of December, and management employees and all the employees that are involved, ensuring that there is training and awareness. We also, Chair, going to continue to monitor and report on compliance and procedures, Chair, going forward. Chair, these slides seeks to illustrate that as much as, Chair, we should not have irregular expenditure, there is a decline on irregular expenditure. As you can see, the financial year 2018-19, the irregular expenditure was sitting at 3 billion. The financial year in review, 1920, is sitting at 1.3 billion. And definitely, Chair, that cannot be condoned. And hence, on a monthly basis, the CEOs are held accountable by the acting group CEO, and then I'm sure the permanent group CEO will ensure that on a monthly basis, CEOs themselves, they can account the reasons for irregular expenditure. But that is not the focus that you want to do. What you want to do, we want proper detection to ensure that there is a proper reduction of the irregular expenditure. The tracking, Chair, is to ensure that consequence management is taken going forward. We are not happy at the current moment, but we can see that there is a telling decline of irregular expenditure. Now, what are the major contributors of irregular expenditure at Prasa? You can, on the slide, Chair, reflects that competitive bidding not being followed contributes 52% of the irregular expenditure at Prasa. And that, Chair, talks to the fact that the internal control environment needs to be strengthened. And also the second one, Chair, which talks to procurement, which is 12%, and the other it's issues like which we have picked up, like parceling, which happens during the procurement process. But we are aware, Chair, of the issues, and in this current financial year, we are addressing these issues so that come the end of the financial year 2021, there is a telling progress that is being made by holding the CEOs accountable. We have also noticed, Chair, that in the previous years, there has been no condonation of irregular expenditure because, Chair, where value has been derived by the organization, the PFMA prescripts allows for condonations to be done, obviously with consequence management, so that you don't get repeat of such conditions. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure, Chair, is also, the graph is showing that it's on the decline. Year 18-19, it was sitting at 51 million. In the current financial year, it's sitting at 48 million. That is where, Chair, we are strengthening. As of yesterday, the expert team has said to ensure that this is tracked on a continuous basis and on a monthly basis. The only way that you believe is to address this matter is to ensure that we strengthen the control environment and the serious consequence management that gets communicated company-wide, because once employees know what will be in for them if they violate the supply chain policy and the PFMA, it will be one of the deterrents in ensuring that that does not happen. Fruitless and wasteful expenditure, Chair, we also have got long outstanding debts in the organization that has resulted in Prasa incurring interest because of those debts not being paid within the timelines of 30 days and the aging of payment of debts, the days are far beyond what is required. But Chair, the CFO, when he is presenting, he will speak to that in detail. I've already alluded to the contributors of the fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Chair, consequence management is critical in ensuring that we address these issues. In the current financial year, there has been employees that has been dismissed for violating procurement processes because one of the key issues, Chair, is irregular, awards. And this talk to the security contracts that were irregular at Prasa, and these are senior officials that have been dismissed this current financial year. The slide, Chair, further indicates that there is work in progress. Also, managers in engineering that have been dismissed, that talks to the general overhaul program because it's a big program, Chair, that requires that the employees that are managing this program internally are sound and the issues are addressed. And also, Chair, I've already alluded to the fact that the SIU is attending to these matters. Also, the Hawks, as at the end of September, I was briefed by the Hawks in terms of their progress, and they've indicated to me that investigators have been allocated to deal with the matters that are in relation to the derailed report of 2015. Talking to consequence management, Chair, I think last year the previous board had to account on the status of consequence management. Chair, consequence management in its nature is continuous and it's fluid. So as we're sitting here today, I might be telling you that these are the numbers of employees that are being consequence management. As you wake up tomorrow, the numbers might have changed. So it's fluid in nature and it's continuous, but this slide we tried to highlight what has been done in terms of consequence management in relation to PFMA. The areas, Chair, where it's reflected not applicable, it is not that consequence management was not taken in relation to PFMA. It was just an issue of how it has been captured by human capital on the SEP system. The AG was very particular in 1920 to say that we would like to see that this employee was dismissed, was consequence management, was consequence managed as a result of violating PFMA. So for this current financial year, Chair, 1920 number of employees that are facing consequence management in relation to PFMA were 10, and 6 were dismissed in 1920. And for this current financial year 2021, 17 employees are undergoing consequence management or disciplinary hearings. We have appointed law firms through the Nexa panel that are assisting us to deal with these matters, and 8 employees have been dismissed. We have employees, Chair, that have resigned over the years. We are currently in the process of ensuring we will, Chair, once the SIU has concluded its investigations in terms of the secondment agreement, because sometimes employees resign to run away from consequence management. We will ensure, Chair, that we seek legal advice where there are serious violations of Prasa prescripts and the PFMA, to seek legal guidance in cases where we can recover monies of Prasa. And that, Chair, we are going to do. You will notice, Chair, that there are also 2 board members that the SIU, previous board members, not current board members, previous board members that the SIU is currently investigating. As I've alluded, Chair, my office meets with the SIU and the Hawks on a monthly basis for them to give us progress, and that was the arrangement that we had even during the time of the Prasa administrator. Now, Chair, part of the performance of Prasa, we had to look at what is it that Prasa commits on the corporate plan that gets submitted to the shareholder. And you would notice, Chair, that in the last financial year, 1920, there has been 14 objectives that we committed to, and 114 key performance indicators. Chair, in any organization, to chase this kind of deliverables in any way, you would find that it becomes impossible to achieve 114 KPIs in one financial year. So that is one of the findings that we have addressed. And in this current financial year, 1920, we have maintained the critical objectives that talks to service delivery, that talks to the customer, the effective management of the capital program at Prasa, and improving commuter and the passenger experience. Those indicators, Chair, from 114 have been reviewed to 35, so that we are able to manage, however, not depriving the organization of progress. Now, Chair, I'm going to be brief to say, in terms of the last year performance, what were the impediments that has resulted us in not achieving the performance? From objective 1, strengthening governance, as I've indicated, Chair, the internal controls that focus on detection instead of us being reactive is one of the areas that we need to look at. So the risk management framework has been implemented, and there is a risk register and a heat map that indicates what Prasa has to focus on. There is still a need, Chair, to focus on ensuring that if as per the commitment of the corporate plan, a strategy of Prasa is required. You know, Chair, that the direction of the company is not set by the corporate plan, but it is set through a strategy document. That is the work that we are going to work on. But I would like to give the committee comfort that the operating model of Prasa has been developed. The second objective, Chair, indicates the decline in revenue at Prasa. And that is serious, Chair. Metro rail revenue declined by 47%. The mainline passenger service revenue declined by 52%. Autopex revenue declined by 46%. And that, Chair, in the last financial year, it is because of the customer numbers and the reliability of our trains. And the key impediments that affected the performance of the revenue, Chair, is the issue of the locomotives. And I think the Honourable Minister has already alluded that we need to address the issue of the locomotives and the train sets in the organisation. There is a plan in place, Chair. We have received an approval from National Treasury to extend the current contract to ensure that we are able to provide the mainline passenger service to increase the passenger numbers, so that this picture that we see here, it does not continue. We do take cognizance, Chair, that the recovery of the corridors, it is impacted by the COVID. To date, Chair, we have recovered 15 corridors so far, and there is work in place that is to ensure that more corridors are recovered, including the recovery of the main passenger line services. The availability of locomotives. We are also working, Chair. We have already received a commercial agreement, a draft commercial agreement that us as Prasa, as per the directive of the Honourable Minister and the current Board of Control, that we must expedite, and it must be finalized on or before the end of December 2020 to ensure that we are able to access the Stedler locomotives. There are locomotives, 6 of those locomotives are already in the country, and we are looking at in total getting 23 locomotives from Stedler, so that we can have a reliable fleet, which will be a fleet that is a combination of diesel and dual, which is diesel and electrical locomotives. The train sets, Chair, you know that we have got Gibela that is providing us with the train sets, and one of the impediments has been us not having enough capacity at the depots to accommodate those trains. The Board of Control has visited Cape Town last week, and they've given myself a directive that the timelines that we have set to ensure that we unlock capacity to receive additional trains from Gibela is addressed, not with the timelines that we set, but they would like that were concluded within 6 months. So the availability of train sets, Chair, will be unlocked with the program of the asset disposal. As you notice that there are various train sets that have been banned in the country due to what has happened over the years. And scrapping the assets following the relevant governance processes would enable us to open space in the Braamfontein yards and Salt River Yard in Cape Town to ensure that there is enough capacity to get the train sets that are required. So I'm indicating to the committee that there is a plan in place to address the issue of availability of train sets as well as the locomotives. We are also, Chair, in the interim, because we understand that some of the train sets that we need to get from Gibela will require that the work that is done by the University of Stellenbosch, as well as Transnet and Prasa, for clearance of the OHTE is addressed. I have addressed the committee last week, Friday, to request them to review the timeline because we don't have 4 months for that work to be concluded. We are also partnering, Chair, with Transnet in a formal way as directed by the Board of Control to ensure that the low-hanging fruits of opening up more capacity is achieved. I've already alluded, Chair, I'm not going to repeat the issue of the train sets, the implementation of SEP, Chair, in terms of ESS, MSS, and SEP maintenance to ensure that we are able to account which assets have been maintained and which assets have not been maintained, as indicated on the asset management and maintenance objective. The engineering team, as per this report, in the last financial year, the engineering standards have not been developed. For maintenance, Chair, it is critical that a maintenance standard is developed to ensure that there is work that is performed. We are also working, Chair, to create capacity in-house for engineering to ensure that we are able to have capacity for the maintenance and the leadership in terms of infrastructure maintenance. The insourcing of security was not implemented as it was agreed, and the Honourable Minister did announce and gave a directive that Prasa must insource. That program is in progress. We are hoping, Chair, that we will get by 1 December to 90% of the recruitment for those. The drones and the armored vehicles, they are in the priority pipeline, Chair, of this current financial year for sourcing. Integrated control rooms, they were reported not implemented, and also, Chair, it's in the pipeline. We're tracking this, Chair, on a weekly basis. It is chaired by myself with the CEOs of the divisions to ensure that come 15th of December, when National Treasury, as per their directives, that no work can be advertised during that work. Whatever it's in the critical path of Prasa is concluded by that time. The procurement for business, Chair, the targets was slightly below target in terms of the achievement for black ownership. Target was 13, achieved was 12. One of the key areas where we did not achieve is the level 8 BE recognition for Prasa. The supply chain team in this current financial year, Chair, is working on that. The revenue for real estate, it was also below budget, and it was due to revenue not collected from the tenants. And I think the team is working on it. Furthermore, Chair, the capital program was so below budget, from a 10.2 billion to a 2.4 billion. It was, not desirable. We know, Chair, that there is, as I've indicated, there are big programs that are currently in place. One of those programs is the modernization of depots like Volmatin. We are hoping, the work has been done, Chair. The documentation, I understand, has been finalized. It should come to my office in the next few days. And also the GO program, the advertisements will be in progress, as well as the fencing program. So the high priority program, Chair, it is a visible program that we are tracking, and we have got confidence that come the end of the financial year, in terms of the capital program, we will at least be sitting at 9 billion achievement. And that, Chair, it is due to the fact that the lockdown did impede the performance of Prasa for 2021. A build to last objective, development of the operating model, it was not developed. It has been developed this current financial year. And I think the Minister, the Honourable Minister, indicated that he is hoping that come 2021, the results will be different. A workforce plan is a document that says define your optimal staffing numbers. We have requested assistance from Dr. Mateta, who's seconded from the CSIR, to assist us with this one. We have already developed the shift pattern guidelines, which talks to the overtime in the business. One engineering function was not achieved, and the Honourable Minister did put it in the corporate plan as the 9-point plan of the administrator. One real estate entity, the submissions have been made to DOT and the National Treasury, but there is some work that must be still completed by Prasa, and we are tracking that, Chair, on a monthly basis to ensure that we are meeting the target. Objective 13, which talk to customer satisfaction or the customer satisfaction index, the target was 60%. We achieved 52%. We maintained 60%. That survey, as you speak, Chair, is currently in progress for the current financial year. The 24-hour Prasa call center also was not achieved. And Chair, it is currently in the procurement process so that there is one 24-hour call center for Metro Rail and Autopex, because we are one Prasa. We want a customer experience to be enhanced in a way that it can be tracked. The rail expansion project, indicator 14, Motherwell, Blue Downs Rail, Davidson and Etwatwa. The work that is currently done, Chair, there is the designs being developed. I've already alluded, Chair, when I presented the slide of 114 key performance indicators. It is not advisable, and will ensure as Prasa that that does not happen forward, that where designs have not been put in place, that should not be put into the in the procurement pipeline. Only where specifications have been developed, not a design phase, should be put in there. I've alluded, Chair, this slide, Chair, just seeks to indicate per division, where are the indicators that were not achieved. And this, what is key in this slide, Chair, is to ensure that the assets of Prasa are protected through a consolidated and integrated approach of our assets. And it is not only this responsibility of security, it is also the responsibility of the end user, which is infrastructure, in ensuring that their signaling equipment, it is buried to ensure that it is not easy for criminals to access such. So also, Chair, a number of projects in ICT were not allocated funding. That has been unlocked, Chair. As of September, the ICT team has been allocated funding to ensure that the document management, which was one of the AG findings, and I'm happy to report, Chair, that the document management program by the CIO has been put in place. It just requires, Chair, ratification and approval by the relevant committees and the Board of Control. Chair, I request to hand over to the Group CFO to cover the finances.
All right, no, that's fine. Let's get the GCFO and then we'll go to questions.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson. Sorry, I was just switching off the acting.
Yeah, I suggest you do.
Chairperson, I'm just going to run through. Firstly, good morning to the Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, and DG of Transport, yourself, Honourable Chairperson, and members of SCOPA, Chairperson of the Board of Prasa, and board members, as well as the acting Group CEO colleagues. So, Chairperson, I'm just going to run through, particularly from a finance perspective, performance over the financial year, just some key salient information. So, Chairperson, just in terms of financial performance, particularly from a group perspective, you'll see from a revenue, group revenue perspective, we've gone up just over 2 billion. Now, I'll unpack some of the details related to this, mainly related to additional subsidies. Then from a group expenditure perspective, we've gone down again just under 2 billion. Again, I'll unpack some of the details in the next slide, Chair. Then from a group profit loss perspective, you'll see in the current year, we reflect a profit of just over 2.2 billion, sitting at 2.3 billion. Now that, Chair, includes a lot of non-cash flow related items, particularly from a grant perspective in terms of how we account for those transactions within the business. And therefore, I have disclosed the group profit and loss being the last bullet, which excludes non-cash items. And there you'll see we're sitting at a number of just under 1 billion at 800 million. Now, that profit is in effect an allocation of additional grant subsidy that we received in this financial year that remain unutilized at financial year end. The mix of that is 600 relates specifically to the NTM workers, which we have a settlement agreement, and 600 is still payable post the financial year end. And then the other 200 is a mix of energy costs from Eskom as well as then municipalities which have been settled post financial year end. Then, Chairperson, just from a revenue analysis perspective, Chair, you'll see a mix. And particularly from a comparative year-on-year perspective, we have increased from both an operational subsidy as well as a capital grant subsidy allocation, which are the main contributors to our revenue mix in both financial years, but heavily weighted again in the 2020 financial year. And then, Chair, the graphic on the right, in the main reflects the revenue mix in terms of revenue generated internally within the business. So and I think the storyline relates to both network and trade availability, which have obviously resulted in reduced fare revenue across the entire network. I can see year on year we go down by just around 500 million. And then I think just from a business perspective, again, you'll see in terms of interest that we generate, and this is purely on the back of additional capex that remains unspent over the financial years, which have been contributed to the low capital sort of program that has been executed within the organization. So therefore, there's a increase in terms of revenue that relates to interest. Then, Chair, from a cost perspective, as I've articulated in the in 2 slides earlier, there is a reduction on a year-on-year basis, but when one unpacks that revenue, you'll see there's the Swifambo impairment in the 2019 financial year of 2.3 billion. So therefore, when one does a comparative year-on-year, it's effectively a flat year-on-year comparison across the entire spectrum of expenditure. And this slide, particularly the graphic, speaks to that. So you'll see employee costs are fairly flat with the marginal increase year-on-year. And in terms of general expenses, I have articulated what the mix of that is in the main: security, municipal costs, as well as health and risk, particularly from a cleaning and check perspective in the CRES environment. But those costs remain fairly fixed year on year if one excludes the Slofanko impairment in 2019. Now, I think just from an overall perspective, Chair, I think the message is that whilst capital subsidies are going up and revenue generated is going down, we still have a fairly fixed cost base with the business. It's something we have understood. We continue to understand it on a monthly basis, particularly in terms of trying to analyze this from a variable versus a fixed cost basis, so that we can drive the business a lot better going forward. I won't talk too much about this, but it's just an expenditure sort of graphic that gives you an indication of what the key contributors are to the expenditure of the organization. And on the left, you'll see both staff cost and general expenditure contribute highly, staff costs being around 42%. But again, when one strips out all the non-cash items, you'll see expenditure particularly related to staff costs reaching the 50% mark. Now, from a benchmark perspective, I think we're looking at probably in the region of anywhere between 46 to 48%. And that will reduce, particularly if revenue generated internally within the business increases over time. So the intent is to obviously bring that down over a period of time. And Chair, just from a balance sheet perspective, and very quickly, our property, plant and equipment value is sitting around 40 billion. The mix of that is about 18 billion, sitting around 45% of their total balance, where we have not managed to adequately as a business convert that work in progress timelessly into property, plant and equipment. And I think the acting group CEO has alluded to issues around the asset management, particularly from a register perspective, but also from a work in progress perspective in terms of that conversion. Again, I think we've grappled and understood what the core issues are, and they relate in the main to, I think, transactional accounting people who are effectively managing the asset base, and therefore, in terms of the plan that the acting group CEO alluded to earlier, you'll see we are targeting a devolution of the asset register into the divisions, particularly at a technical perspective, where we have the ability of technicians, engineers, assisting the organization in managing the assets, not only from a custody perspective, but also from an impairment perspective, that allows us to write off values, provided we go through the right governance process in terms of investigations, etc., before we do that. But at least there's some sense or sensibility around the asset register that we are then able to produce to the audit agenda. Then, Chair, just from a prepayment perspective, this is a contractual prepayment related to the Irregular contract. That's around 8 billion. This prepayment is in the main released over the receipt of trains up to set number 600. Cash and cash equivalents, you're sitting at around 24 billion. Chair, this is mainly due to unspent capex. If one unpacks that number, there's only about 2 billion that is in the main related to operations, whilst the rest reflect unspent capex. The capex spend, Chair, you'll see it's sitting around 2.8 of 8.1 budget. And that's, again, decreasing from the previous year, where you see it's 3.5 of 8.4 billion number. Just again aligned to to the storyline where we are just not executing projects as we should have in terms of capex allocations. I won't speak too much about investment properties because the main driver of this, Chair, across our entire portfolio is fair value adjustments. Then conditional grants, again, Chair, we're sitting at just under 49 billion. There's a high correlation to the unspent capex that sits on our balance sheet. Now, if one unpacks that 49 billion, there's about 18 billion of work in progress, as I've spoken to earlier, and around 23 billion related to unspent capex, or the 24 billion unspent capex, and the 8 billion related to the prepayment, which gives you a sense of what the mix on that conditional grant is. Then, Chair, just having gone through the audit process and understanding what the core issues are, I think we've obviously taken the approach that we would like to adopt a high impact sort of solution towards resolving the key issues with the organization. And therefore, in the main, the first two bullets speak to that in terms of recovering our asset register. And I have spoken to both the mix of technical expertise from a project management perspective and also aligned to the portfolio of evidence sitting at a project level that facilitates the transactional element that feeds into finance. So it has to be a collaborative approach in solving this problem. Then from a group policies and standard processes perspective, I think there have been the indications that policies were not established within the organization. But that being said, I think if one looks at the database of policies at the register that has been approved post-financial year end, one will realize that there has been significant process, particularly from a group policy perspective, as well as a standard process or standard operating process across the entire organization. I think there still is the element, though, Chair, of institutionalizing those processes so that it evolves again all the way into the various divisions, as well as then to its lowest levels at stations, etc. From an accounting policy matters perspective, and these relate in the main to some of the qualifications that the AG has raised. There's two major areas which relate to capital grants and our development leases. We have a differing view from the AG in terms of how these transactions need to be accounted for. And therefore, Chair, we again, as a parallel process, have unpacked our views related to this and have embedded a process where we will engage with both our shareholder as Department of Transport in getting concurrence on our view related to that, as well as then the National Treasury from particularly the Office of the Accountant General. And then I think we will have a conversation with the Auditor General in advance of the financial year end, so that we at least have a way forward before even reaching the audit cycle next year. I think the acting group CEO has spoken to the SEM loss control consequence management areas, so I won't delve into the detail of that, Chair. I think just lastly, in terms of the last bullet around appropriately qualified as well as experienced personnel, I think having looked at the various issues, we do sometimes we have acknowledged that we don't necessarily have the right skills to adequately address all the issues that we are faced as an organization, and therefore from a human capital perspective, we are engaging to, particularly from a skills assessment perspective, understand the match And I guess as quickly as possible post that is then to ensure that we bring in the right skills in order to take us forward. And it also relates specifically to aspects related to technical accounting, etc. And in the main, those skills don't necessarily reside pervasively across the organization. There's just pockets of that expertise. But like I said, it's something that we do have a grasp on, and we're trying to fix in terms of taking us forward into the next audit cycle. And Chair, just around repositioning ourselves in order to deliver our mandate, I think in the main, these don't speak to all the aspects, but I think again, in terms of high intensity or high impact, in terms of the first bullet around consequence management, I'm not going to repeat what the acting group CEO has communicated, but a process has been established. I think the second key element, Chair, is around business recovery, and particularly from a recovery process or a recovery planning process. As much as we have done it from a budgetary perspective and understanding some of the key drivers, I think just strategically there is an appreciation that we need to understand the security element, the corridor recovery plan, as well as the resumption of service plan. And then once we have the ability to do that, how do we recover our revenue base, particularly from a ticketing system perspective, as well as managing any fare evasion to its lowest level in the organization. And then I guess once we have that embedded, it's the implementation and the tracking of that. I think we also have an appreciation around business continuity, particularly from the perspective, I think COVID has just exacerbated the understanding of business continuity and the requirement for it. But I think where Prasa is as a business, I think it should be there in any event, and there is a process in play to unpack that for implementation. I've spoken or I've touched on the integrated security plan, but there's a lot of detail behind this which can be talked about if required, Chair. The Group CEO has spoken around capacitating supply chain. She has spoken around document and contract management. I have touched on the last bullet or the last row in here, capabilities, particularly from finance, SCM, and performance monitoring within the organization. Then, Chair, again, the acting group CEO has spoken around ICT to a certain extent, but having assessed the organization from an ICT perspective, particularly with the new CIO coming on board, we have realized the core platforms within the organization that require stabilization. And that speaks to all the elements around hardware, software, and in our environment of particular importance is around connectivity across our entire network, again, to its lowest level at stations, and having the ability to communicate with the regions and then with head office. And then I've spoken to disaster recovery and business continuity, but this speaks specifically to stabilization of the ICT environment. That is a key enabler to business continuity. We have, again, understood the risks through the CIO around security management, as well as the weaknesses that reside within the general control environment, particularly from the various programs perspective. And then I think moving on just around human capital management, I think the acting group CEO has touched on that. We have dealt with the asset management plan articulated by the CEO earlier. I think just the last few around, again, in terms of our recovery plan, understanding our signaling projects and how they align to that recovery plan, capacitating our project management
Can somebody draw the attention of the CFO to the chair, please? Hello?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, CFO, I would request that you just speak to the salient points and be quite summative about the issues, because I think the minister and the acting GCEO have covered the fundamental salient points what we wanted to speak about. I think we also need to manage our time. So I think that let's not repeat on things that have already been said. Let's go to the important issues and move with speed, because members still have to pose questions. So can we manage our time, please?
Noted, Chairperson. I'm just sitting on the last slide. And Chair, this just in the main, as concluding remarks, I think, again, maybe not to repeat, but the CEO as well as the Minister had spoken around our core mandate, having the ability to transport passengers. I think we have spoken to the issue around the appointment of the board and our ability to then deliver on the mandate. That is aligned to the 9-point plan. And that's the end, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think it's right that I request you
I'll
not to
hand back
repeat
to
things
the acting group CEO, Chair.
I don't think it's correct that we request you not to repeat. The first thing you do is to say, well, not to repeat and then repeat. I don't think that augurs well for the kind of interaction we want. Right, GCEO, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. From our side, Chair, we are done. We are ready to take questions, Chair. Thank you.
All right, honorable members, Honorable Van Minen had indicated that she would like to be first off the bat, and then Honorable Swartz would follow. Honorable Van Minen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know it's all very well to say that there's no option but to make Prasa work. What concerns me is since the last time we have actually discussed this issue, I'm not seeing very much progress at all. I want to start with the issue of the administrator and the illegal appointment of the administrator. How does that affect spending under his watch? Is it illegal expenditure? Is it wasteful, irregular expenditure? How will this be addressed? I also want to know how come the administrator got a premature bonus before departure? And his remuneration, how is that going to be paid back? And is the minister going to be responsible for therefore? Also regarding lockdown and the massive issues we've had with vandalism and theft, how can the asset register reflect any kind of increase? How can revenue reflect subsidies and grants? Because that really can't be seen as revenue. Again, last time we had the issue of the fact that conditional grants were not being spent. What is happening with that? Security contracts, there was a lot of statements made about security contracts. Why are they not renewed in time? If we only are going to have potentially 90% in place in December, what's going to happen regarding potential vandalism over the festive period? And can they please address that as well? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Van Minen. Honorable Swartz, and then Honorable Lisi will follow.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, mine is on two issues. Lack of governance, the records, the missing board meetings minutes have been highlighted by the AG for the past 3 years. Who has been held responsible for this? It is also concerning that there are no records of board's decisions for the past years. Who are the board members who are currently facing disciplinary processes? The company secretary is responsible for keeping these records. Who are the secretaries that have been held accountable for this? The second one, Chair, Prasa has also procured assets that they don't use which has led to fruitless and wasteful expenditure. How much is fruitless and wasteful expenditure for the year 2019-2020? Thank you, Chair.
All right, Honorable Liz, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the new appointees. Good luck with a very, very big job ahead of you, and you'll certainly get our support for doing the right thing. So please anticipate our support, but there's much wrong that needs to be fixed. I'm interested to know the situation with these locos and Stadler Rail. We're being told there are 6 here and 23 to, I think, was the number to come. What about the ones that were delivered and were unusable? There was a stage when they were being offered on auction. Can we have some feedback as to how many there were that were delivered and unusable? Was the auction successful? Did we recover the costs for those locos, or if not, how much are the losses involved in those sales of those ones? And then in terms of the train sets, a great deal has been said about what is going to be done about the train sets and clearing scrap out of the yards and et cetera. But what that implies is that the services being offered are at the moment are inadequate. Can I get confirmation that that in fact that is the case, and that we're not able to meet the demand? And also, what is our on-time records at the moment over the last few months? Then I just want to emphasize the question of the infrastructure. Lots of plans about what's going to be done, but the vandalism appears from the comments to be continuing. So what has been done to ensure that the theft and vandalism stops? Or is it just a matter of letting it carry on whilst plans are being made and new contracts are being negotiated? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, no, thank you very much, honorable colleagues. I'm checking our list, and for now, those are the hands, right? I think the first question has already been asked, but I think, Minister, we would like a comprehensive explanation about the set of circumstances which characterized, one, the appointment, of course, of the administrator, and what are the legal ramifications for that irregular appointment of that administrator, and what happens, has already been said, to the set of decisions of that time and their legality, and the costs involved insofar as the presence of the administrator was concerned. And the record of decisions becomes very, very important in this regard. So I think we would, it would be fair and correct that an explanation is provided, because that matter was raised in our last meeting, and we indicated that we would await the court decision, and already, of course, that has happened. So I think I'm just amplifying the first question that Honorable Van Minen has asked, because I jotted it down. Your expansions and deviations, of course, are quite extensive, and we would like a submission, a comprehensive submission of all those expansions and deviations, because we will probably have to zoom into them and have a hearing on those as well. I'm sure we'll indicate a date as to when I would like those by, as we have done with other SOEs. All right, then insofar as your investigations are concerned, there is quite a number of forensic investigations that are not being done by the SIU. So who is conducting those? And whilst you have an SIU secondment, why are those investigations not done by the SIU? And what is the scope of those investigations? But I think on the flip side of that, because Advocate Mutibi is here, the head of unit of the SIU, if we can get an appraisal of how the investigations are going without, of course, going into the substantive details, as these are matters that are still live, and when we can expect those to be actually concluded, and to ascertain whether Prasa is cooperating with this investigation. Right. Then there's the issue, of course, of workmen's, because you had contracts with workmen's of about 300 million rands, which were awarded irregularly. And so what is the current progress on those contracts? And whether you still have any other contracts with workmen's now, and if so, what is their value, and what do they actually include, or what is their scope, rather? Then the issue of of course, there's been the perennial headache of the former CEO, Mr. Lucky Montana, at Prasa, and what is the progress insofar as cases around him is concerned, if there is any, and so maybe the question, what is the status of those in investigations insofar as, or cases insofar as he is concerned. The issue of minutes has been raised, and the minister and the deputy minister, and I'm sure the DG will recall that it's the meeting with the dysfunctional interim board. If there was the issue of the set of minutes that had not been adopted, but the schedule of payments had been quite up to date. So that issue becomes a problem. And so I think I amplify again the question that has already been put. What is the status around all those outstanding matters? Because I would imagine, one, they cause some great deal of unease for the new board, coming into an environment where there is uncertainty about the legality of the decisions that have been taken, that they are inheriting, and of course just a dismal record keeping, for lack of a better term, which has characterized Prasa, indicative, one, of corruption, two, a failure to adhere to basic fiduciary responsibilities by boards, and three, the highest level of incompetence, which characterized the board at the time. And so what are the corrective measures then, insofar as those issues of record keeping are concerned, and what has been the implication for that failure to adhere to basic due regard of administrative management at the board, and what are the state of consequence management that has been looked at? Because when we raised this question at the interim board, they were all over the show and unable to explain why they had that had happened, and it was quite clear that somebody or some people were being protected. And of course, our suspicions, correctly so, may veer off to, amongst others, the company secretary. So those are all issues which require clarity. And so I will hand over to you, Minister, and your team now, and then we will come back for a second round of questions. All right, thank you. Responses, please.
Chair, Honorable Chair.
All right, there you go, Mr. Chairperson.
May I start, please, if with your permission?
No, sure, that would be proper.
The first question about the the Honorable Van Meener, the records of the decision that is taken by the administrators. As a new board, we have directed that we need a consolidation or decision inventory, all the decision that has been taken by the administrators, so that as a board, because those decisions would fall into a gray area given the court ruling. And therefore, once all the record has been consolidated, we would then have to, as a board, apply to our mind to every decisions and, of course, regularize those decisions where they need to be regularized in terms of the act or the rules. Obviously, then, of course, we would, all the decision, we don't know how many decision was taken. Once the record of decision has been received, we have directed that information be provided. Very soon, I think the company secretary has been asked to provide that for the 7 and 8 of December, so we're able to deal with that issue of regularizing. The issue about, if I move to the next issue, the issue about obviously the issue of payment that minister could speak to, but I think it will be part of all the record of decisions on matter that has been taken place. On the conditional grant that was not spent, our quick evaluation that we are doing, what we come across is the issue about capacity, that the capacity is a challenge in terms of the capabilities for the managers to be able to spend in CAPEX. Hence, I spoke about earlier about stabilizations that we have talked about in terms of personnel and skills, that appropriate skills for members, for the officials to be able to spend the money accordingly. In terms of the priorities of the board, including the issue about making sure that core function of Prasa of running train with the associated infrastructure is carried out. So at the moment, we have put the board onto 3 months to make sure that we're able to address the issue of skill shortage, including looking at the collaboration with the other sister SOEs where we could obviously leverage on their existing skill and capacity. So that's what we're doing in terms of that. So given that we are 5 months before the end of the financial year, that is what we're accelerating at the moment. The security contract, I think that the board is seized with that. There is a new security strategy that has been adopted, as the minister spoke about it. It includes the 70-30 that we need to have in-house security. At the moment, there's an acceleration for the additional security to be appointed that will obviously make sure that they look after the infrastructure, because this is a catch-22. If you don't have the security to look after the infrastructure, the question of vandalization will continue, damage of property will continue, people will continue to loot infrastructure. The missing or fruitless expenditure, if I could deal with that, we have asked also that the work that the CFOs are doing, that they must help us to understand all of that in order for us to understand whether that issue is you have to go after people or it's a matter of the following the PMFA, including taking a particular decision on that. We are waiting for all of that, the consolidation of all of that. This is also, I can also bring the issue of Bergsman in place. We have asked last week that all the record of expenditure to that has to be brought to the board, including the scope of work that these company were given, to see if already the AG has already pronounced on that particular matter. We would then look at as a board as what we need to do in terms of the irregular expenditure to that magnitude. We are waiting for that. Quickly, Chair, the missing record, it's a mystery around that, including the issue of whether the payment is up to date, but it is part of what we have asked all the officials that were there to see what has happened. I think the audit and risk is dealing with that particular issue, Chair. So we will be in a position probably after the 8th to be able to give a comprehensive, even if it's a kind of written response. Included in that is a consequence management, because the record of decision in an organization like that is an important aspect. The logos, a quick issue about the logos issues. I think that the minister spoke about it. It's part of a shareholders compact. Our view is that those 23 locals that are waiting somewhere should be have a passage to come to South Africa, so that we are able to utilize them in meeting the objective, the core function of the organization. I think maybe the acting group CEO could add, if he wants to add on that issue. We want the CFO as well as the acting group CEO could talk about the auction, the result of the auction. The train set, yes, I think the honorable member that asked the question, there is a shortage of train set. There is, particularly with what has happened now, including the fire burning of trains. That is why the issue about the board intervention on the accelerating or speeding up the depots where you can have the newly manufactured train to be able to be kept there and be able to be deployed to provide a service, because the older trains with those fires are now necessarily incapacitated, basically. So that's what we are in the process of addressing. The issue about all the other investigation and what is outstanding is part of the record that we have asked for as the new board in order to see where we have to expedite. We are having an outstanding meeting with the Hawks so that we understand where they are with certain investigation, because the investigation has been taken a bit longer than everybody expected. So I want to leave it there, Chair, and ask the acting group CEO to add on the issue about the one that is here and the auctions that has been spoken about. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
All right, AGCO.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to quickly speak on the issue of locomotives. 7 locomotives, Chair, were auctioned, and as you know that there is a process of liquidation that is in progress, and those locomotives were sold for the value of 95 million, and the liquidation is still in progress. As I've indicated, Chair, there is a draft commercial agreement which will then enable us to access the rest of the locomotives, and obviously with the liquidators and Stedler being on board to ensure that we are able to be in possession of the rest of the locomotives. So there were 7 that were sold. Chair, if I may, on the issue of lack of consequence management, was there consequence management taken in the team that is in the company secretariat? The previous company secretariat, Mr. Lindikaya Zide, was dismissed by Prasa, and we have got a fairly new team that started in August 2019 that is assisting us to address the issues of document management, to also speak to the question of the chair of what is being done to ensure that the issue of document management doesn't continue into the future. There's a process in place, Chair, to migrate all employees of Prasa to 365 to ensure that in the future, for audit purposes and self-assessment, there is no dependency on individuals to provide documents. So if Tandega does not provide a document, the organization can go on the server and draw the document. We have also introduced e-document that all contracts of employment, supply chain contracts must be loaded on e-document so that there are no files that an employee can sit and say they cannot access the documents. And I think, Chair, we do have Advocate Mutibi in the meeting, and Mr. Mike Goya from the SIU, to your question where you needed clarity to understand if we are cooperating with the SIU. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I think before we go to the SIU, there was issues around workments that I posed.
Chair, are you going to give me at the end or when?
Yes, no, we will come to you, Minister. Don't worry. All right, let's go to the SIU, and then we will do follow-ups, unanswered questions, and then Minister, you will come in after the SIU. Right, Babu Mtibi, welcome, and thank you very much for being here. Your cooperation is always inspiring.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members, honorable Minister, and Deputy Minister, and members of the board. As it was indicated during the presentation, that we do have a secondment agreement with Prasa. We had a secondment agreement, and the other one, it was signed in September, and it's correctly meant to end in February of 2021. It's got its own focus areas, which we do not have the details of it at the moment, but if there's details needed, the lead investigator is with me, Mr. Mike Goya, and the Chief National Investigation Officer, Mr. Leonard Lekhetwa, with me. Chair, we just really thought, as invited by the Chair and the committee, just to give headlines of where we are. So the secondment agreement has got its own focus areas, and to date, there's been various outcomes that also contributed towards consequence management, as indicated by the acting group CEO. I'm informed that those officials were suspended, about 8 to 9 or so, and 2 of those have since been dismissed. So we can see that there's really consequence management being meted out. And on the proclamation itself has got its own focus areas. And Chair, we would appreciate that at some point, if SCOPA could probably just schedule us so that we can do a comprehensive presentation. But for purposes of today, the proclamation covers about seven focus areas, which are the security services, the general overhaul and upgrade services. It covers the work or services in respect of systems overhauling, repair of rails and infrastructure, or maintenance through the implementation of the supplier development program. It also focuses on an advanced early detection cable theft solution in the Bonton-Heavel-Philippi corridor in the Western Cape. It also covers the travel management services, the supply of mobile transporters, and forensic services. So to date, there's been quite a significant progress being made. The total value of these matters that are under investigation has been quantified to over 7 billion. There's outcomes that the teams have reached. There is a potential criminal referral of 4 persons. As I indicated, that the 2 dismissed officials, 1 company and 1 director of the company. Those officials who have been dismissed, of course, as we always say, that once the employer-employee relationship is terminated, it doesn't mean that we will not follow you further on criminal charges where evidence points to that, and even the recovery in terms of civil litigation process. So, Chair, there's potential recoveries in some some areas which we have identified. But as I said, Chair, we stand ready to present comprehensively, and we are in the process. I'll be indicating to the lead investigator. We will reach out to the group executive. We'll reach out to the board so that we can appraise them of where we are with our comprehensive investigation. Chair, the question you've raised around the timeline, we are anticipating that this investigation should be completed by end of March 2021. That's the proclamation part. The secondment agreement is targeted to be completed by February 2021. Thank you, Chair. I know it was high level, but it was really just to give the Honorable Committee a sense of where we are. As the Group CEO indicated that she's got regular meetings with the lead investigator, so they are appraised on a regular basis on where we are with our investigations. Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Right. No, thank you very much, HOU. Minister Mbalula, can we hand over to you?
Thank you, Chairperson. Very briefly, pertaining to the matter that has been raised. The court did not pronounce, Chair, on any other matter other than the unlawful appointment of Mr. Mpondo. We subscribe to the principle known principle referred to as Odekral principle. All matters and decisions taken by the administrator remain valid unless set aside by the court of law. There is a plethora of similar examples by our courts. The appointment of the then NDPP, Sean Abrams, was declared unlawful, but his decisions were spared and he did not pay back his salary. And the interpretation of the court was different from ours, Chair, when we made the decision. It is in that regard that the judge was not saying to us that we are anything else other than to say we inherited a mess at Prasa, and he's sympathetic to that. And he then said it is the appointment rather that was declared unlawful and not consequential acts taken by Mr. Mpondo whilst at Prasa. Thank you very much.
Right. No, thank you very much, Minister. Right, colleagues, are there any follow-ups? Honorable Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the responses received. I just want to follow up on two issues. The first was with regard to the situation of vandalism. There have been months and months of media reports, horrific reports of the destruction. I mean, it's just disgusting, of the infrastructure. So my question was, what has been done to stop it? I mean, I'm sure if it was our homes that were being vandalized in this way, we would immediately take action to stop it. Various forms of action, including police involvement, but armed guards and so on. And that's my question. What have we done to stop it happening, or is it just simply carrying on as we speak? Are cables being ripped up, etc., etc.? Then the second one, Mr. Chairman, maybe I'm not understanding fully. So, with regard to these locos that we're talking about, 7 were sold on auction for. And the price was 95 million. Okay, so what was the cost of those? Were they 200 million and we lost 105 million on the deal? Or were they 20 million and we made a profit? And what that was my question as well. And how many were delivered unusable? Was it just 7? And so those are now out of the system. and the ones that are now on their way will be usable on our network. So those are the two questions I'd really like a response to, please, Mr.
All right. Thank you very much, Honourable Lies. Right. There was the question around workmen's, whether you have contracts with those and what's the value, what's the scope. And the second question was around cases involving Mr. Montana and how far those are and where they are. Right. Responses, please.
If I may proceed on the questions. The questions on how much did we pay, I don't have the figure in front of me, Chair. That can be provided, Chair, or the original amount that was paid for those locomotives. The second question of can we utilize these locomotives in our network? Yes, the locomotives can be utilized in our network in the areas where we have got the 25 kV, and in the areas where we have the 3 kV, we know and we have been advised that we cannot utilize them. However, to correct that, there is a team that is working in place, that is currently in place, as I've alluded during my presentation, that there is a tripartite team that has been put in place to ensure that once these locomotives are in the system, there are no challenges on the network, and mainly from the track to the catenary wire. So Stellenbosch, TFR, and Prasa are currently working to check if there could be no challenges on the catenary wire. And I've indicated, Chair, that the team advised me that that work could take between 2 and 4 months, and I've requested that that work should be concluded timeously. The list, Chair, should be the end of January. I have already, Chair, contacted the head of infrastructure at TFR so that we can have a bilateral to fast track that, so that these locomotives can be able to be utilized. I've just been provided feedback, Chair, in terms of what was the original amount that was paid for these locomotives. It was 2.6 billion. That was the amount that was paid. Now, Chair, there was also a question of what is it that Prasa is doing about the vandalism? The insourcing of security is one of the initiatives of putting boots on the ground. And that 3,100 that we have recruited, we have got 1,000 that is currently already have been deployed in the various areas. We are cognizant, Chair, that is not in no way enough to cover the number of stations and buildings that Prasa have. Hence the integrated security strategy of Prasa, which talks to a combination of technology, utilizing technology and cameras in the other areas. You would see, Chair, in my presentation when I was speaking on the objective of security, that we are also in the process of ensuring that in the short term, Prasa would have drones. Part of the recruitment that we are busy with, Chair, we are also recruiting armed security guards, because to have people that are on the ground, if they are not armed, it then presents problems in the organization. We also have got a joint operation specialized services Chair with SEPS, and I think, Chair, we are working with them, which we normally call them railway police. But I must confirm, Chair, that the recruitment that I was alluding to say by 1st December, we must have ensured that we reach 90%, and that 90% will talk to the boots on the ground, accessing and finding armed security. We are looking at a different recruitment approach where we can directly have access to the database of SIRA. That's Chair, we have reviewed the actions of the security team last night. And Chair, there is also a concerted effort to insource experienced operations security managers that will be deployed at Prasa to ensure that the running of operations at Prasa in terms of security is enhanced. And for the stations that are currently running, when we resumed the services at Prasa, we recruited platform marshals. And as much as they are platform marshals, they are assisting and they are ensuring that there is vigilance across the stations. So the Honorable Alfred, we note your question, and we are doing all that we can. We know that as we speak, our security deployment plan is not adequate, but we are confident because we are tracking it monthly, and we have got the support from the shareholder. The shareholder and National Treasury further in October allocated Prasa an additional 900 million to ensure that the security strategy of Prasa is enhanced and we are not hamstrung due to budget constraints. Thank you, Chair.
May I come in, Chairperson?
Yes, and you are?
I'm Smanga Sitini. I'm a board member. There is a question that the Chairperson asked, and I don't think it's been responded to.
That's fine. Thank you.
Chairperson, it's in relation to what has happened in respect of the issue of Mr. Montana. Chairperson, as the Chairperson of the board has already stated, we have requested the management to give us all the records of the litigation that has been instituted against persons associated with Prasa, owing to the report by the Public Protector of August 2015, the report that was entitled Derailed, which made remedial actions that a Prasa board must ensure that it recovers money spent by Ms. Montana and Mr. Montana and others. So, Chair, we are still waiting for that information. We requested that information last Saturday during the induction of the board. And my understanding is that before the end of this week, that information will be availed to us. And in that respect, we will duly ensure that the SCOPA is fully appraised, and by extension, will share same with the SIU. It is very crucial, Chairperson, as we discussed with the board, that we should leave no stone unturned in ensuring that we recover all the taxpayers' monies that have been squandered or allegedly squandered by persons identified in the Public Protector's report. So I think that is the question that I think the Chairperson posed, and it was not responded to by the acting Group CE. Thank you very much.
All right, no, that's fine. I do not want a perception to have been created here that we are going after one individual, but that was a high-ranking member of the institution, and that's what we want. We want there to be progress on issues and bring all these things to a logical legal conclusion. Then there's the issue of workmen's, which I posed. It's the third time I'm
Chair, can I
to this.
Take the issue of workmen's quickly?
Yes, you may proceed. Can we get a response to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. The issue of Werksman, in terms of the investigation, I'm going to request Advocate Mutibi to respond on that, Chair. The second part of Werksman, if it's continuing to do some work, there are some litigations, Chair, that Werksman is working on, which are historical in nature. I don't have the numbers, Chair, in terms of how many and what is the cost, and that can be provided, Chair. So I request, in terms of the investigation of the Werksman appointment and matter, Advocate Mutibi to deal with it. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I'm not sure. Yes, I'm not sure how it goes to SIU, but let's get what the HOU has to say. Abu Mtib.
Oh, Chairperson, it's Leonard here, Lekhetho from
Okay.
SIU.
All right, sure.
Responding on behalf of Advocate Mutibi. On the issue of Werksman, I think, like Advocate Mutibi indicated, that there are quite a number of contracts that we are currently investigating. Given an opportunity, will come and brief scope on all the investigation that we are doing, of which the appointment of Werkman, it's one of the contracts. And the investigation is at a very advanced stage. So we will be in a position to brief SCOPA when we're given that opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. And that's why I was saying, I'm not sure how it becomes an SIU matter. What I was checking was whether outside that 300 million rand of the irregular appointment of Werkmans, is there work that Werkmans is doing for Prasa and the costs associated with that? I think that is where I was with this issue. But okay, I think we will get that in writing. Colleagues, are there any further questions or comments that colleagues would like to make?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman.
And then I will hand over to the Minister for concluding remarks. All right, Honorable Liz.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Yeah, Bonk. Mr. Chairman, I just want some clarity still on these locos. So is the GC saying that the 7 locos cost 2.6 billion and we sold them for 95 million? I think that's not probably the case. So the 26 billion presumably was for a whole lot of locos. So how many? And I can then work out with a basic arithmetic how much the 7 cost us. And then there's this, these months-long process taking place with the University of Stellenbosch about whether the locos can or cannot be used and which lines they can be used and so on. What happens? So in the end, are these locos, is there a chance that the locos still won't be usable, even so this research could come up with a conclusion that the locos will not be usable, at least on some of the lines. And is there a chance that there would need to be modifications, which, if that is the case, why weren't the ones that were auctioned modified? I'm really battling to understand this whole process and the costs involved here. Perhaps I can get some clarity, Mr. Chairman.
All right, can that clarity be provided, please?
Chairperson, may I maybe ask that because the locos, it's not only the 7, there were a total number of logos that were in that contract of 2.6. Now, we have asked the same question as the board, that we need to finality on these questions of locals, those that are in the country and those that are not in the country. Because as we understand, some of those locals were outside of the country because of the ongoing litigations, therefore they were kept in the harbor there until the litigation is over. So what we as a board would like to know, what asset do we have, what asset does Prasa have in terms of logos? And that we are, of course, having to finalize that discussion with the acting group CEO and Rail. So I think perhaps what we could do here, so that we don't mislead Parliament, is to get a comprehensive report on those locals based on the question that the Honorable Lee has posed, and then we also explain how many were then confirm how many were then auctions, where are the others that were part of the pack of a number of locals. So I think perhaps if we could be given that, we could even do it in writing. I'm just worried that we give wrong answers on our feet. But we also have to say in that report what was the initial arrangement, which route were these locals purchased to operate in, because we were informed that the locals were not necessarily going to replace the metro rail. They were going to be deployed in the areas that are 25 kV, which it's a different type of design of that particular line. So perhaps if we could, we are given opportunity to do that, I think it would be much better, and it will be comprehensive enough. If further questions are asked on that, then we can answer those questions either in person or in a form of questions and writing back to the committee. That's my plea, Chair, if you want, so that we don't go around and give you maybe wrong answers on the very important questions around the resource and of the country. Thank you.
All right. I think, Honorable Liz, I think you are agreeable to that, to get the numbers correctly in writing. And if we can get that by Friday, close of business, that will be correct alongside the schedule of expansions and deviations which currently sit in your books now. Now, all right, let me hand over to the Minister if he's got concluding remarks, and then I will wrap it up for the day, colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the committee and the opportunity to be here. And I can see that today you are not as harsh as you are always. I think you are giving this board what you call in Parliament, a good welcome. But it's not always like that. Yeah, it's very hot and around Prasa. But Chair, I can tell you that I think we are quite impressed with the team we have put together, but we'll see with the time as it goes. We do have 2 members of the board who did not take up their membership. The other one, because of work, decided to get out of the heat because she said that she realized that this work is too much. We're going to be appointing those 2 members maybe next year, because cabinet cycle comes to an end as of the 2nd of December. So we will not be in a position in this period to be able to get those 2 members to be replaced in the current, this year. I'm happy with the answers that have been given. And I think some of the issues will require the board to familiarize themselves and get the necessary reports. But I think I was with the board signing the compact this past weekend. And I think they are hard at work, and all the best to them. But thank you, Chair. I hope that when we come back next time here, there will be remarkable progress on most of the things you have raised with us today. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Minister. Our reputation precedes us when we meet with new boards. We are generally nice. I do want to, of course, welcome the board and assure them of our support for so long as they do the right things. Our support is conditional, and we've got a full appreciation of the challenges which have beset Prasa, as triggered by that meeting we had with the interim board, which resulted in their dissolution, and that is why we are here today. And of course, we appreciate they have been in office for a month or so, and they are still finding their feet, and they are still looking around to see what is there. Primarily today we met. Can Krishna Gavin unmute themselves, please? We wanted to also, Minister, beyond the update, to reiterate to the new board that this matter of Prasa remains firmly on the radar of Parliament through SCOPA. It is one which we are taking very, very seriously, because the majority of our people are dependent on a functional, effective, and efficient Prasa to commute, to work, to look for employment, to go to school, amongst other things. If I had it my way, the priority of bailouts, which I'm not a proponent of, but if I had it my way and bailouts were readily and easily available, the first entity which is supposed to receive the highest level of support is Prasa. The movement of our, particularly the black majority, which do not have the luxury of flying, amongst other things, are dependent on a Prasa that is functional. And therefore, this chaos and nonsense of the destruction of property, the looting, the thuggery, which has characterized certain quarters of society, is a slap in the face to those whom we seek to liberate from the clutches of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We are setting back our own people if we disrupt and destroy Prasa. So it has to remain on the radar, and understanding its importance to the economy and just the social dynamics of our country. So the board must have that keen appreciation that Prasa has to function, Prasa has to be effective, and they really need to hit the ground running. And the sense we are getting is that they are. Some information, of course, is not readily at their fingertips as things stand now. We'll give them the benefit of doubt that in our next meeting, they will have appraised themselves fully with the issues. We will look at the annual report and the AG's findings on these matters, and assure the board that we will be looking at their expansions and deviations very, very closely, because we have realized how that is becoming a norm, whereas it is an exception. The SIU, we've noted your timelines of February 2021 and March 2021, and we will, of course, be scheduling you for a comprehensive update as you have requested, because our interest is to make sure that Prasa actually works. Minister, don't tire in those efforts. The agents of thieves which want to loot and pillage the state are not going to relent in their efforts. Ours is to push back on those frontiers of corruption and state capture by doing the right things. And so the law enforcement agencies have to play ball. Let us have successful prosecutions. Let us have recoveries for the state's losses. And let us beef up Prasa insofar as security and so on is concerned, and deal with the historic matters so that they do not become a lingering headache which obscure our perspective about how Prasa should be functioning. If there are further questions, we will send them in writing, and then of course the submissions will be made. Once we have made a determination about the sitting for SIU, we will inform you, and on the expansions and deviations, and of course on your annual report. Because I think the final thing is we do want to have an inquiry into Prasa. We have drafted the terms of reference, but I think we'll have to allow these processes that are underway to run their course. And then where there are shortcomings or where issues have not been dealt with, we'll look at. That's the seriousness which we are looking at Prasa, Minister. Colleagues, just one announcement, or two in one. On Thursday, we are off to KwaZulu-Natal for our oversight into municipalities. Please make sure that you communicate with the staff to make sure that all logistics and travel arrangements on your part are sorted out. The second part is that next week we were due to be in the Eastern Cape for an oversight again, but the House is now sitting and we are therefore unable to travel to the Eastern Cape. We will then have to make a determination of how we maximally make use of those 2 days next week. It may be that maybe the SIU can come in next week for that comprehensive report on Prasa, but we will look at that because we've got 2 days next week. I don't want those days going to waste. Time is money, and we have to make use of them. And of course, I was in contact with Umam Zibula and visited her family, our colleague, on the passing of her daughter, and we keep her in our prayers. And I did convey the condolences of the committee on Sunday when I paid them a visit. So please do keep her in our prayers, and communication will be given to us insofar as funeral arrangements is concerned. So on that score, Babu, chairperson of the board, we wish you and your team well, and hope that you've got a keener appreciation of the seriousness which is on this part of the committee. And as the minister has said, our next engagement may not be as welcoming if things are not moving with the speed and urgency we require. So colleagues, having said that, let me apologize for the glitch again from this morning, and the meeting stands adjourned. The House sitting is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Long live the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. So take care.
Good.